The dust kicked under my feet and the sun burnt the back of my neck. My sweat felt nice, running under my clothes and down my back, cooling me some. My wooden throat knew it had been a while since my last drink, and the extra notches on my belt said that it had been a long while since my last meal. I figured I must have been about 60 miles west of Lewistown. Papa had always said the Mississippi were just shy of 80 miles out. As soon as I lay my eyes on that river, I'd head south. Papa said that I was better at rolling down hills than I was at climbing up them. I figured him right, and south were as good as any direction. I was cutting cross country, so I was sure I wouldn't see no towns for a while. It was looking like I was about right, just lonesome houses with lonesome-looking folk in the yards. There were dribblings of livestock trying to eat the dusty grass. They were almost as skinny as me. I should have packed more food, but I was in a real hurry. I figured I could pick up some work on my way south, and they'd pay me in food. But I know folks haven't got much more than me out here. Their cupboards would be as empty as my belly. I would try to find me a farm and maybe buck barley for work. Farms were always good for food. Fresh eggs and milk. We had our own hens that Mama would let me tend to, collect their eggs, hold them, pet them, but Papa would just cut their heads off. He didn't like it when I hid with the hens. He'd say, "That chick's number's up," and then he'd find us. The sun was climbing higher above me and drying out the air in my chest. I needed to get me some water, and I weren't sure I'd make it the few hours I reckoned I had left to go. And thirst plays tricks on your eyes. I thought in the distance I could see a church house, shining bright against the brown fields. But God hadn't played no part in my life for a while, so I thought it were a vision from my dry throat rather than my eyes. I kept on, but that church house stayed right where I'd first seen it. I didn't believe it real until I stood right at the bottom of the steps. It was small, but it was simple, like most of the churches I'd once known. The doors to this one were bolted shut, and the windows were pretty murky. There weren't a soul about the place, except those trapped in the ground round the back. At the side of the church was a trough with a single faucet hanging over it. Not all water that comes from churches is holy, so I figured it would be all right for me to wet my lips right there. I stepped over the little fence and walked up to that trough. Turning on the faucet, I felt like a hog at feeding time and just as happy. I let the water wash over my skin and I slapped handfuls of it over my face and neck. I gulped it deep, feeling the cool spread through my chest. I reckoned that was the clearest water I'd ever tasted, and if it hadn't belonged to a church, I would have stripped down to my skins and bathed in it. My clothes were still dusted with the road, but my skin was as clean as a church altar, and I felt like a new man. I drank one last handful of water and filled my empty jar. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and looked around me. The sky were as blue as Emily Jones's eyes. Emily couldn't talk, but when she turned those eyes on you, it were like you knew what she were trying to say. Mama had said that Emily could talk, but that she chose not to. Our teacher always said that if you haven't got nothing nice to say, then say nothing. That made me sad, because Emily must have not had nothing nice to say. I bet if she saw how beautiful that sky were, she'd talk about it.